G'day punters and welcome to Tab's Inside 50. Between us this week we played 705 AFL games, won 3 premierships and a Brownlow medal. Nick Quinn, Shane Crawford and our special guest.
The whole crowd wants Dustin to have a shot.
If we were taking requests, this has to be a talk. The crowd willing him on. Killjoy. Well, he might kick it anyway. He has. Oh, put down the phones. We don't take requests. What a beauty.
There he is, Dustin Fletcher, slotting a long goal on Anzac Day. Do you remember that one fondly?
Oh, yeah, I do. It's great to hear Dennis. I think it was Dennis commentating. Great to hear Dennis's voice. But, yeah, I do remember that. Anzac Day is obviously a big day and just gone. But to kick one on Anzac Day, didn't kick too many, but it was a good day.
Now, it's always great to speak to legends like you, but we feel the Essendon supporters, they need a morale boost, so we've got one of our fan favourites in you on this week.
Oh, thank you, yeah. Well, it's a bit of one of those weeks, isn't it, where... tough at a footy club when you're, 1-5 or 1-6. I'm not even sure what we are. I'm sort of trying to ignore it a little bit. But, yeah, tough week. But you've got to go through it. And you get another chance on the weekend to get out there and play a bit better footy.
Now, Shane Crawford, during your time at Hawthorn, there were challenging periods as well. What would you be telling the Bombers supporters at the moment? Because no doubt you had to have similar conversations along the way with the Hawks fans.
Well, they came in with a bit of hope this year, and that's the thing, that supporters listen to the media a little bit, and the media are saying Essendon definitely a top 4 contender, and then obviously when you don't win games, the pressure mounts. So this is where you can really find out about a lot of the players. You know, it can galvanise a side together. You can find out which players, are prepared to stand up and be counted, but they'll be right. It's only early on in the season. They'll get their groove going. They do have a really good midfield, which sort of amazes me at the moment. They've been getting smashed around the midfield, but they're getting plenty of the footy. So they're probably playing a little bit like the Bulldogs played a few years ago when they were overusing the footy a bit. So I reckon if they can eliminate a handball or two around a stoppage, take ground nice and quick, it's amazing. Things can turn pretty quick. But, hey, Dustin Fletcher, what an absolute legend. When you think about it, and I sort of started at the same time when Dustin was starting. He was a schoolboy. I know we're jumping ahead of football, which we like to go through your younger days. But he's jumped from school football straight into playing, for Essendon, still rocking up and doing his maths and English and whatever else. He was a good tennis player too, so we'll get to the bottom of that. But when you throw a team at me, there were star-studded full forwards. So, Quinny, throw a team at me back then.
Oh, well, the forwards in the 90s. Lockett.
I said throw a team.
Hawthorn.
Right, Hawthorn. Jason Dunstall.
St Kilda.
St Kilda, you'd either have Tony Lockett or someone else after he left.
Lowe.
Yeah, Stewie Lowe. There you go.
Adelaide.
Modra. Very good player.
Carlton,
you'd have Kernahan.
Brad Pearce.
Yeah.
We won't go.
It goes on and on and on. Give me another team.
Richmond.
Well, Michael Roach wasn't playing then, was he?
Oh, I didn't man him. I had Richo for a little bit.
Yeah.
It was probably more centre forward, but good player.
The great Matthew Richardson. You think of West Coast Eagles, Peter Sumich. You've got Kangaroos. You've got Longmire, Carey, Geelong, Gary Ablett. He had to go and play on these guys as a young kid.
Sleep at night knowing every Saturday.
These are some of the greats of our game. All of them are greats, really.
I think it was a good thing I was at school. People saying I never played fullback in my life, so I didn't play much sort of junior footy. It was just school footy, which was 8 games a year, and that was sort of me. So I didn't play fullback. I didn't want to play fullback. I played full forward at school and centre forward, and that's sort of what I knew. So learning to play fullback or playing in the back line on those guys was tough. I think it was a good thing I was still at school because. It's like you get back to school, your mates and the teacher was hanging on you for a couple of hours, and then you just feel back into that student type of feel at school. But it was tough. I was lucky I had some positive people around me because I didn't think too much. There were some days I thought I played all right, and I'd still have 5 or 6 goals kicked on me. So that's just the way I dealt with it. And then, fast forward 3 or 4 years, I sort of felt like I belonged in AFL football. Not until I was probably about 22, 23, to be honest.
Who were the top 2 you had to play on in your career?
Oh, that's harsh, isn't it?
That's why I said top 2.
Yeah, it's hard. And we had a few big goes against Hawthorn, and I don't like to bring them up, but Jason Dunstall was one. And I do remember Waverley Park And I'm talking guys like Darren Jarman and probably yourself, Croft, just with, Dunstall clearing everyone out.
Yep.
And it was just me and him in the 50. And you knew it was going to be 2 hours of tough footy. He didn't say too much. He was quick off the mark, fantastic mark, great kick for goal. So he's definitely in that top two. And to split, Tony Lockett and Gary Ablett's tough. I probably couldn't do it, but there was something about Gary Ablett that I just thought he was the one that could do anything. Out the ruck, torpedoes. Again, he didn't say a word to me over the whole journey, but just an absolute freak of an AFL footballer.
What about that? What about starting your AFL career and you're coming up against, players that you probably watched your whole life thinking they're amazing and you obviously looked up to them. But back at school, so Quinny wanted me to ask you this. So you're back at school, you're playing senior football. Surely the girls were starting to go, there's Dustin, he's playing for the Bombers. It started pretty young for you, having a bit of luck.
Oh, it did. I wasn't a good-looking bloke like yourself, Croft. So I was 6'5", strawberry blonde hair, had a few pimples there, still being 17. So things probably weren't as great as yourself or a Mark Mccurry or a Ricky Olorenshaw or a James Hurd, maybe.
Well, the baby Bombers did come through.
Yeah, but it was good fun. It was good fun growing up, being at school. It came pretty quickly, really. My first year too, let's go back to 93, it was Essendon were going to let me play school football, so I was going to play the majority of the 10 games in HSV footy, and the next 10...
Because your dad was coaching as well, so there's no way that he was going to let you not play for his side.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, that was the case, and then I was going to play in the reserves for the next 10 games. So my 1993, when we sat down with Essendon, was going to be 20 games of footy, 8 with school, 10 or 12 with the VFL program. So, but that changed quite early. I think round 3 or round 4. I'm not even sure what round it was I debuted, but to get straight in there, it was a pretty fun year.
And it was quite an amazing journey, as you alluded to. In the pre-season, it still wasn't on the radar, and before long, you were the key fullback in a team that went on to win the premiership. What was it like dealing with Kevin Sheedy in those early days, and how quickly did the goalpost move from those initial goals?
Moved quite quick, and my relationship with Kevin Sheedy was quite good. A lot of, even you ask the players today, they sort of, they might have knew where they stood, or they wouldn't go and sit in his office and have a chat. It was just whatever Sheed said, he'd eyeball you, and that was how it was. But I'd known Sheeds for quite some time, so I probably felt that like I could go and sit in his office and have a chat, have a coffee, have a cup of tea, whatever it might be. And I sort of understood him in a different way. And so my relationship with him was great, because there wouldn't have been too many other people that'd put a bloke in that's 6'5", never played fullback in his life, skinny. And to put him in at full back, I wouldn't have got too many votes at match committee. So it was lucky that I got his vote, and we went on obviously to play. I think he coached me for 285 games, so it was a pretty good relationship I did have.
You were very good at tennis. So before you started your AFL career, you were very good at tennis, and even so, once you finished your AFL career, which was 400 plus games, went forever and ever, which was just incredible. You then have started doing some tennis coaching as well.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Tell us about your tennis career as a junior.
Yeah, so it probably started quite young. I was about 8. Again, didn't play much. I didn't play any local footy, didn't have a local footy club. Dad always thought, I'd always kick the footy around, but Dad always thought there's plenty of time for football. So we travelled around Victoria, Australia, playing a lot of the country tournaments, and was a reasonable player. Had a ranking there for a while, Australian ranking, Victoria ranking. So it was all tennis for me.
So what was your ranking? Come on, tell us.
Under 14, so that's going back. But that was my best ranking. I got to about number 12 in Australia. And then, as you go on, under 16s and under 18s, obviously not as much. But I love tennis. It was a sport that I probably played for. I was never going to make it. That's probably fair to say that. You've got to be good to play, professional tennis. You've got to be in the top 300 basically in the world. And obviously I was just sort of battling away with an Australian rank, a Victorian ranking. But my claim to fame was we had a couple of guys, Andrew Wheely and Mark Philippoussis, who were the ones that were the good players back then. I beat both those guys.
Did you?
Once. Mark probably had beaten me about 14 times, but I did beat him once in a tournament, which was my claim to fame. But love tennis. Was a good sport.
So he was obviously a big server. So what was your game? Did you have a big serve?
I was like Pat Rafter. I served, got straight to the net.
Oh, did you?
And tried
Serve
to
and
finish.
volley?
Yes, tried to finish the point as quick as I could. Like playing on grass. My ground strokes, forehand was all right. Backhand.
You got the long reach?
Long reach. And yeah, like to get to the net and finish the point as quick as I could. And I actually had a fair double. We were actually we thought we were quite good at doubles. We were undefeated there for about 4 or 5 years. But my doubles partner was actually Chris Anstey.
Right.
Chris Anstey was about 7 foot. I'm about 6'5", and we used to think we were quite good. We'd shake the kids' hands at the start of the game, and they'd sort of look at us thinking, "What have we got here?"
We can't lob today.
Yeah, you can't lob today. So, but that was fun. I grew up playing with Chris for some time, and good mates with him, and to see we had similar paths in a way because Chris, believe it or not, never played basketball as a junior. He didn't play his first game of basketball until he was 19. And I was a little bit different. I played a bit of footy growing up, but Chris went on to play, obviously overseas. And his claim to fame is he never lost to Michael Jordan. So I can't go with that. But he only played him once. I think, and they beat him that day when he was playing for Dallas. I think Dallas Mavericks. So we had a great doubles partnership for 4 or 5 years, and then we obviously went our separate ways when we got to about 17, 18.
That would have been intimidating, hey? Imagine that, like little scrubber like myself coming up, and then you see these two giants. You think you've got absolutely no chance. So Philippoussis, did he win the US Open?
Lost the final.
He lost the final. Did he play
Rafter,
Wimbledon as well in the final? No,
he beat Pete Sampras at his prime at Wimbledon and was beating him, but then he did his knee, so that derailed him. So he was a star though, one of the best in the world.
So that's a huge scalp.
It was. There's a bit of mayo on the story. He was actually probably about 8 months younger than me. So Mark used to always play up. So you'd play under 12s and I'd play under 14s. Mark would play under 10s and under 12s. But no, he was a great player, and in the end went on to have a good career. Probably, to be honest, could have probably played a little bit longer. I think he used to get a bit excited with the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris and whatever else.
Too much money going around then.
But that was tennis, though, wasn't it?
In horse racing terms, he needed to be blinkered, I think.
Yeah,
that might have certainly helped. So, did it give you a lot of pleasure watching those other people you played with and against go on to achieve great things?
Oh, no doubt. And again, there were a couple of other guys along the way who didn't sort of go on to those heights, but a couple of them went on to play Australian Opens and different tournaments. So yeah, I enjoyed watching that. And obviously, Chris was a fair basketballer too. So we had a couple of friends in that sort of area out the northwest of Essendon that went on to do different things. But to watch anyone achieve success at the highest level, it's a good effort, especially in sports like tennis and probably golf's another one. I didn't know too many golfers, but a couple of really tough sports to achieve the ultimate in.
And so now that you've finished, and then you do a bit of tennis coaching every now and then. So why the connection back to tennis? Did you play tennis whilst you were playing footy as well, or did you sort of stop and then you just reconnected with the passion that you had?
Yeah, I stopped basically, and what footy got like from probably 2000 onwards, it became a lot more professional, and I didn't actually pick up a racket for quite some time, and it wasn't until I got back into tennis when I did finish that I realised those childhood memories of how much fun you did have. So, back coach, we were down at Geelong Grammar. That's when I first started, just with a good mate of mine, Mark Shepherd, who's been in the tennis game for a long time. And, I just didn't really enjoyed it. Football was a part of it for 23 seasons, and I felt like, I wasn't really at work when I was out there hitting a tennis ball. And, again, coaching's coaching, I believe, if you can, whether you've got a cardio group or you're doing a private lesson from a young kid to an older person, as long as you have a bit of fun, you try and let the kids learn every session, and that's what I go on, the tennis coaching. So I've really enjoyed that. It's only sort of 3 nights a week, but it can get busy. But I'm getting a bit older, standing up, running around on a tennis court. It's getting tougher and tougher, but still got that enjoyment back from when I was young.
Imagine the coaches, at the schools. Dustin rocks up, takes a session in the tennis court. The footy coach is thinking, hang on, no, we need him over here. Can you come over and help us? Surely they're trying to drag you away from tennis.
Yeah, well, it's quite funny because when I first started back, there's a couple of really good players that we do coach that hit them quite well, and I remember one kid came down and, he must have known a bit about footy and said, "Oh, Dustin will be coaching you today, rah, rah, rah." And the kid wasn't too keen on it. And I'm not sure if he barracked for Carlton or Collingwood or someone else, but and he wasn't sure if I could hit the ball because I played a lot of footy. So I thought, and the kid could hit him all right. So I thought we'll just get him in to play a couple of tiebreakers. So I got him out there. I put him to sleep in a tiebreaker, 7-1, and the next one was 7-2, I think. And I said after that he was quite good about
He's
it.
like,
but
listen.
I let him win a few points after that. But it is good fun. As I said, where they're a cardio group of young kids, I have a laugh. I don't take myself too seriously, never have. So it's good fun.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned that footy wasn't your priority growing up as a youngster. When did it come on the radar? And you went to Essendon under the father-son rule. So was Dad really keen to not put that pressure on at an early age?
I think so. Dad was very, very good with me because I was a relaxed kid. I was the type that slept in and didn't really. I still probably don't now. I probably should push myself a bit more. But he was probably the one that I always had a foot in my hand, even though I didn't play much local footy at all or junior footy. So Dad would always get me up and we'd be out there kicking, running around and playing footy. So he didn't put pressure on me, but he was very. He sort of. I reckon he had something in place that was going to work, and in the end it did because I got to play a lot of tennis, did all that, and I could count on my hands how many games of footy I played up until just before I got drafted. So Dad always thought, he said, don't get in the weights room, which I couldn't do too many weights anyway, but he goes, you're quick. You can read the play pretty well, and you've got the long reach. So we don't need you to be building up you too much in the gym. And early days I was quite skinny, so Dad sort of thought, well, wait till you put on some weight before we got a few games into you. So it worked for me, just playing those 8 to 10 games of school footy.
The Penley Essendon.
Penley and Essendon
Pegs.
Grammar, Pegs.
Yep.
Obviously a big rival with the Assumption and guys like, Ivanhoe Grammar and, Marsland College was another big school. So it was a really good competition, but for me it was only 8 games of footy a year until I played a year of the Western Jets. That was the first year of the TAC Cup. But it didn't set the world on fire then. It was just my relationship, I think, with the footy club and Kevin Sheedy that probably got me over the line to be picked up under that father and son rule.
Now, I said we had some texts come through, and I got one saying, can you please ask Dustin, does he remember ironing me out in the Pegs versus Assumption game at the showground? Spectators were left gobsmacked, and that's from Dan Kelly, a racing enthusiast.
Yeah, Dan's one of my best mates. And he did. He absolutely. I was only probably 5 metres. I thought Dan was dead. And this is the thing about Dustin Fletcher. Hey, he might be nice and have this soft little outside, but I tell you what, he's got this hardness inside.
So you were there when this happened?
I was there, and I feared for my mate's life because he just got absolutely wiped. It was all in play and fair, but oh my goodness! And do you know what? He's always had that in his game. If you go, how many times were you reported at AFL level? Accidentally.
I think 21 times.
Yeah, so you don't accidentally get reported 21 times.
Yeah.
For all these little accidents.
Do you remember getting Dan? Do you remember that one?
I remember, yeah, it was at... Well,
the noise was...
Dad was coaching.
And I'm thinking, he's dead. Yeah. And you won the game by...
I think we won. But Assumption were always the best school in it, and Croft obviously had a fair bit to do with that. So my old man took it pretty serious. He'd get everyone revved up. But I remember it because I probably had a run-up, and again, I probably wouldn't do it. If I did it now, you'd be in quite some trouble. But I remember having a fair old run-up at it, and I was skinny, so I had to make sure I had a run-up. But I probably took it a little bit... I think I got him quite fair, but you couldn't do it now. But
it was big.
But it was big. But he was tough. He was a nice guy.
Yeah,
but,
they dragged him off on a stretcher. Poor Dan. He's never played footy ever since. But no, he did well to come back. But ever since then, I thought, no, this guy, you got to watch him. He's got a bit of go in him. And he did. Those late spoils accidentally take your head off, but he had to be careful.
A frustrated fullback.
Playing on Lockett and Dunstall and those types.
I never did it to them.
No,
because,
you had to pick your targets.
If I did it to them, I don't think... well, I remember watching Tony Lockett put... we had a fullback just before my time out at Waverley. Brad Fox, his name was. And I think the big plugger put him to sleep one day out there at Waverley in a bit of a headlock in a game out there. So... Yep. I wasn't doing it to Big Tony Lockett, I tell you.
Well, thanks to Dan for that tweet, because sometimes the questions don't go as well as that, but not only do you remember it, Croft was there.
Yeah, Croft was playing. He probably kicked 6 that day, Croft.
I'll never forget the hit. I've never seen a hit as big. The only hit I've seen as big is when Jordan Lewis got KO'd by Harbrow running back, and he was open and he copped a knee and virtually out. And then 15, they virtually carry him off. Okay. And then 15 minutes later, it goes back on. I'm
Probably
like,
Byron Pickett was the other one.
He used to.
Some of those hits were.
Used to pick you. That's when you could line a few off the line, and you could run past the ball a bit and actually wipe people out.
Yeah.
He got Brendan Crummell one day out at Waverley playing. Brendan played with Fremantle and then came over to the Hawks. And he just put him into the next day.
He broke Joe Mercedes' jaw one day at the MCG. It was back when they played cricket. Joe actually slipped on the pitch, and Byron Pickett came through, and he hit quite hard.
But I like how he's diverted it from himself because I tell you what.
Some of my reports, I must admit, I got reported I think twice for shaking the goalpost. So you're minus 2 from there. I'm back to 19, and I did play for 23 seasons, so it's one a year, which is not that.
Not
bad.
Even one a year.
Yeah, it's not that.
I do like the idea about shaking the goalpost though. See, that's creative to me.
Well, Harford got done for getting on the goalpost.
Well, he was climbing it like a koala bear. So anyway, but it sort of makes sense. You give it a little shake and it moves around. It might clip the post.
Now, going back to 1993, you come into that Bombers team unexpectedly, and the team really does rise quite suddenly. You were dubbed the Baby Bombers. When did you start to feel this team could go deep into September?
Well, we didn't start overly well from memory. I think we were 1-4, so I'm not sure if Essendon can do that now. But we were 1-4. I think we had a draw. My first game was a draw, so we were 1-4 with a draw. So early, I didn't think, I thought it was just, for me, it was just trying to get a game, and I didn't expect a game, so I was just, trying to play a few games. But I don't think, for me, it was probably, Tim Watson came back that year, and we started by about round 13, 14, we were back, to playing some pretty good footy. So we were lucky that some of those young guys in, Gavin Wanganeen had obviously won the Brownlow that year. So we had, Joe Mercedes, Mark Mccurry, Paul Hills, young James Hurd, a little bit older, but he played as well. So we had some great younger guys, but for me, I probably didn't feel it until quite late, even coming into finals that late, because I was still at school. I was happy to get my $750 a game, and that was me. But the older guys we did have, Mark Harvey, Paul Salmon, these guys probably knew what we could do, because we had the younger guys to come in and just run, and we had the older boys who were very good players, and I think they knew a lot more before the younger guys that were in that side.
Grand final day, beautiful day at the MCG against Carlton. What was the week like leading up to it, and what do you remember about the day?
Oh, massive week. I obviously still at school, so all that stuff was all part of it. To be.
Did you do the parade? Were you allowed to get out of school and go and do the parade?
I think Friday afternoon it was. Did the parade. I think I was sat in the car with Ricky Olorenshaw, who was an Essendon Grammar boy as well, a touch older than me, and I did mention him before. So we did all that. Again, you were just, as an 18-year-old, you were just rapt to be part of a side that was playing in a grand final, and obviously winning it, that was the next part. But yeah, the whole week was a tremendous week. Nothing. I didn't think I'd be playing senior. I'd be in the VFL at that stage, but got to a grand final. I think I was meant to start on Earl Spalding, and I started on Stephen Kernahan. Mark Harvey had given me you might grab him for a little bit. So I had a really tough day at the office, which I knew, because Stephen Kernahan was, he's an absolute champion. And I had a few, I think I had 5 kicked on me that day before Sheeds give me a bit of a reprieve and set me up forward. But massive day, and to play against Carlton in that one was big.
What was your dad thinking? Because you're a late starter, only playing school footy and not playing a lot of footy. And the next thing, you're in a grand final and you're playing on the very best forwards in the competition. So what was going through his head?
Dad was pretty good. He was pretty honest, and he's a pretty honest sort of bloke. He was pretty honest with, even at a young age, he was pretty honest with his feedback for me after a game. Some people might say, you tried hard, you did well, but Dad was quite straight down the line, I think, which was a good thing, early days. Probably a little bit, the protective parent, really, and mum probably didn't want me playing footy, really, in the AFL at 17. She was just worried about me getting snapped in half or getting injured, which probably nearly happened a few times. So, but Dad was he was good. Between Dad and Sheeds, obviously very two sort of positive people for me, growing up, because, as I said, it was a tough year, 1993, but to come out the end, with a premiership, the boys at school went pretty well, who are obviously still close to a lot of those guys as well. But it was a special year. I got through my VCE too. That was probably the other part. I wanted to make sure I passed VCE too. So the only thing is I did miss the footy trip. They went over to, I think, I'll never live it down. But I to go back to exams too.
That's when Ricky Ollerenshaw and Mark Mccurry, that's when they would have been at their very best. It's probably best that you missed that anyway.
Yeah, I made up for it. I think I went on 21 out of the 23 as the time went on, but I did miss that, and I got through the exams. But special year for the footy club. I don't think we expected to be in a grand final. It was one that even Essendon supporters say, a lot of people say it was one of the better ones, because we didn't expect to be playing in a grand final in 1993. A lot different to the next one in 2000.
Was it a bit of a blur?
Yeah, a little bit. Again, young. Being young, you just, things happen and you just go out and do it. You know what I mean? You don't think too much about it, which I think was a good thing. And Crawford was probably the same. I just, in that 1993 season, when I got my first game at the MCG, and you drive in, I wasn't driving, didn't have a licence, but you'd go in and you'd be there and you win the game of footy. For me, that after the game, it was old school. You beers would be in the middle, you'd have a couple of pies and you'd sit and have a few cans. And there were times I didn't leave the MCG until 11:30 at night, because I was playing AFL footy. I was playing with a couple of blokes I love, Mark Harvey, Dean Wallace, Michael Long, these guys, Tim Watson. So a lot of the time I was just in awe of being able to play senior footy, but, have a few beers after the game. It was just what footy was and how fun it actually was.
And what about your schoolmates? You're playing in a grand final. How proud they would have all been there, right behind you, because that's pretty amazing. They get to play with you during the week, and then on the weekends you go out and play for the mighty Bombers. So what was going through their heads? Their heads would have been spinning.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably the whole reason I went back and played one game of school footy in that final year in 1993 it was because of your schoolmates. And I'd been at the school since grade 6. Once Dad got the job at Essendon Grammar, we obviously came back. So I had a lot of good friends that I not felt like you owed it to. It was just what I was or who I was. I love my mates, and I probably had a lot more schoolmates early days than when you first walk into an Essendon footy club with some older guys. I probably just was close to those schoolmates. So, but no, they were great. I think my first game was against Carlton. It was a drawn game where Stephen Kernahan missed a shot missed the whole lot after the siren, and I had 20 odd mates go to that game, and we actually had our dead ball. I was obviously still at school, so we were a little bit late to our dead ball, so I had to put that on hold for an hour or so. But
and did you still dance that night?
I danced, yeah. I wasn't too good at dancing. I think I stayed and had a few beers before I danced, but just memories like that for me as a 17, 18-year-old were great memories.
Over the next few years, you personally established yourself as one of the best fullbacks in the competition, and the Bombers go along really nicely. And then 1999, the team has a super season. Tell us about that year and what was like going into that, and unfortunately how it ended in that prelim against Carlton.
Yeah, it was tough. I was again lucky. Early days, 96 again was a good year. We lost a kick after siren to the Swans up there in Sydney, so that was a tough one. But 1999. Going back on it now was probably, you felt like it was a season that got by a little bit. We had a few injuries with regard to, James Hurd with his navicular stress fracture. I think Scotty Lucas might have been a bit injured that day, but yeah, we felt like that was the one that got away. And you ask Sheeds and you ask a few Essendon people, it was one that was quite a tough one, but losing by the point to obviously the arch enemies in Carlton. Mark Mccurry, bit of a funny old bounce, shot at goal, wouldn't really put us in front. And then the infamous Dean Wallace tackle from, what was his name?
Brown?
Fraser Brown, obviously heading towards goal. So it was a tough one, but, you look back on it and, from what happened after that particular game, not playing in that grand final, and it's all known now. We actually went to that grand final. We went and Kevin Sheedy obviously wasn't happy with how that game went. Neither were we, and he made us go to that grand final as a team and watch that grand final. So I think that led us into that 2000 side, which was a good one. But to look back on it now, it's one that sort of got away. I thought we could have won that grand final, but sometimes you've got to get there. That's the toughest part. But to win two, to play in a losing one, two losing prelim finals by a point, it's still a bit tough to take, but you can't do much about it now. Obviously.
You can't be greedy with it all, but it still happens to today. The best side rocking up, during the finals and grand final day doesn't necessarily win.
Yeah.
You've got to let it unfold and hopefully things go your way, and it still happens today. So you're not the only team for it ever to happen to. But I'm sure you'd kick yourself, but you still got to experience, how The ultimate, how amazing it is, and as you said, 2000, you get to follow up and have a good year.
Yeah, and the 2000 was the one. It came from 1999 because Sheeds, he was ruthless after that 99 grand final. So we actually went away from that game knowing what we had to do to get back to pre-season. There was I don't even think we had a footy trip after 1999, or we would have, but we knew when we got back it was going to be a tough pre-season. And he was onto us from day one. We didn't have a big break. We were back, ready to train, and that led us into that 2000 side. But the 2000 side was no doubt the best one I played with. We had some guys in there that were just naturally just tough players, like your Dean Solomon, Mark and Jason Johnson, Damien Hardwick, Dean Wallace, Paul Barnard we mentioned before. So you had 5 or 6 really really strong guys, and it was a team that was pretty well balanced, on every line, and then I think that showed up in that season that we did have.
This is the team. I'm going to read it out just so Bomber supporters can smile and imagine just sitting at the selection table on a Thursday night listening to this team, because
just before you
so
do
good.
it, I can, for someone who played against them when they were humming along, hated it, absolutely hated it, because even when you weren't playing against them and you watch them, they were so well drilled. You knew Mccurry was going to hit up, he was going to create space. They were a well-oiled machine, and hated playing Essendon, especially when you knew, we've got no chance against them. So, yeah, read this team out. It's going to be a cracker.
M. Johnson, D. Fletcher, S. Wellman, D. Hardwick, D. Wallace, D. Solomon,
Ooh.
C. Heffernan, J. Mercedes, B. Caracella, M. Mccurry, S. Lucas, J. Hurd, A. Ramanauskas, M. Lloyd, M. Long. The followers, J. Barnes, J. Blumfield, J. Johnson. Interchange, D. Buick, P. Barnard, S. Alessio. That's frightening.
Yeah, it's a great side.
It's an all-star team.
It was good. Yeah, it was a good side. And I think the average winning margin week by week was, averaged out to 38 points. So it was a rare thing, but you felt confident going into games. I was never an overly confident person, but going into games, you just felt like you were going to win games of footy, and it was a.
And you did.
And we did. And the game we lost, I blame Sheeds, he blames me, but I actually kicked it out in the full that day. Chris Grant swung round and kicked a left foot goal quite late. But I say Sheeds got out-coached, because it was its game Terry Wallace where they put a lot of work into us, and they basically flooded the absolute daylights out of us, and we couldn't score. So, but in saying that, that loss we did have, me personally, I didn't mind it, because you see a lot of teams go through junior footy, local footy, and you go through undefeated and you get to the big one, and things don't go your way. But we got there in the end. Big year, big footy trip. It was fun.
So the half-back line, Quinny, can you just read that out again?
I can do that.
It's tough. For all the
Hardwick, Wallace, Solomon.
Yeah, that's tough. You got Wallace flying in, from centre half back, trying to knock people over. Hardwick was always causing havoc. If you go back and look, he's always causing fights, bumping, smashing into players. And Dean Solomon, he's just hard. The boy from Broken Hill just charges through off the line and just would run through a brick wall. That is.
And if you had to pick someone to fight,
pretty scary.
I'm not sure I'd pick. Would you go I'd probably go Dimmer, but
I'd go Dimmer only because I know he's a big softy underneath. But I wouldn't have picked him if I hadn't have got to know him through the Hawthorn days.
And Dimmer, you're right. Dimmer was someone that. This is Dimmer, for example. Like that 2000, you'd come in and do your weights, and you'd have 3 sets of bench press to do, 3 sets of squats, 3 sets of chin ups, and Dimmer would come in 3 by 10. He'd just do his 30 chin ups. He'd do his 30 bench press. He'd do his 30 dips, and he'd be straight home. Never got a massage. He thought if someone was touching your legs and rubbing your legs, there was something wrong with you. He was a different one. But once that white line was there, he was just. I remember one day he played on Sean McManus.
Yep.
I've never seen a bloke terrorise someone like he did that particular person that day, but he was tough. He was a good player.
Well, you're allowed to bump and push and, not have to face where the ball is coming, and you're allowed to make body contact. And he didn't like players that ran.
No.
Like he hated it. So he would bash them, and that's what he did. And that's the way, even in his early days as assistant coach at Hawthorn, that's the way he coached. Until you weren't allowed to, so he had to come up with another way to do it. But, he was one that always did his job, and it would always, smash his body around, just making sure the opposition couldn't run.
And he came from, I think, the under-19 days of North Melbourne too, so he probably had a few guys there. Obviously, Wayne Carey and all those guys were probably coming through and already playing footy. But so he came from Dennis Pagan, I think, early days. So he always had that. It took him a while to get going, but once he got going, I tell you, he was a pretty special player to have next to you. Yeah, he was a good one.
Now, you mentioned going to the 93 grand final. It was unexpected. It was fun. It was totally different in 2000. All the pressure was on you guys, and you were coming up against a team that had been compared to the 93 Baby Bombers. They were young. They had the Brownlow medalists. They were exciting. Was it a different feel that week?
It was a different feel. Yeah, I matured, or hopefully I'd matured by then, but it was a different feel. And again, I go back to that loss against Bulldogs. I sort of felt like we got that one out of the way, and we were ready to play footy. But again, I think we were confident, and I remember Hurdy giving us a speech just before we ran out, and I'm not sure if he meant it or not, but it turned out all right. He said, "It's nothing. We don't have to do anything different. You know, the back line, just do your job. The guys in the midfield will get the ball out, and us as forwards will kick their goal." He said, "Don't go off on any tangent. Just concentrate on what you need to do. If everyone does that, we'll win the game of footy. Don't worry about the Norm Smith medal. Don't worry about this." And in the end, we obviously won pretty well. But James Hird actually won the Norm Smith medal.
He's not bad, is he? He said, hey.
I reckon he was just planting that seed quite early. But he was fantastic too that day, and played well and won the big one.
He speaking of some of the great players he played with, tell us about James Hird as a player, you know, and obviously as a person as well, you know, because he's been through a great deal, but he was such an awesome and courageous player.
Yeah, he was, and I don't want to pump him up too much, but there was probably one matchup that we didn't like was obviously when Crawf had a pretty good record on James Hird, but he was someone for me. You know, he's a little bit older than me. He probably came from Canberra and did it not the harder way, but he played a few, you know, some reserves grade football for a year and a half, 2 years, and probably did it the hard way in his work ethic. I'd never seen a bloke that could flog himself at training. Like if he was on the bike, you know, he'd give you an hour on a bike that was, you know, I couldn't train as hard as he could. So you knew he had the work ethic, but I think just the ability to put his head over the footy. He was in the mould of, I believe, of Wayne Carey and a few of the real greats, and probably Lee Matthews. When the game needed to be won, you know, he just put himself in the centre. He'd get a free kick. He'd, you know, get his head knocked off. He'd get the ball going our way. So. But he was a fantastic player, and he went through, you know, some tough times with his navicular fracture, kept him out of footy for some time. And then you fast forward a bit, you know, obviously the coaching and the whole drug saga took its toll in the end. But
he was coaching you at the time, you know.
Yeah.
And so you were that senior figure.
Yeah, I was.
How do you get through stuff like that?
So when he first coached me, I must admit I was a little bit nervous because I was probably getting older and probably coming to the end, and James Hird was going to be coach. So for me, that pre-season I wasn't the overly hardest trainer, but when I knew James Hird was coming back to coach, and my relationship with him was quite good, so I felt like I had to train a lot harder and be better, because I never wanted to put James Hird in the position where he had to drop me as a player. So from an individual sense, it actually worked quite well for me, knowing that, you know, I was friends with him, but I didn't want to put him in that awkward situation of maybe retiring me or having to drop me. Or
yourself as well.
Yeah, that's right. So, but again, I think he could have been a great coach. He obviously learnt from Kevin Sheedy, and we got Mark Thompson across from Geelong, who we all respected and did a great job with them. So, it didn't work out, obviously, for the reasons we spoke about it, but it was a tough period of time because, you know, the whole drug saga, football sort of got forgotten, didn't it? We weren't talking about footy anymore. We were talking about what was happening to the Essendon Footy Club, and there were mistakes made. There were mistakes made by Essendon. There were mistakes made by the AFL, and there's no doubt Asada made some big mistakes. But tough period. Probably the good thing is now it went on for 4 or 5 years, way too long for mine. It could have been dealt with a lot quicker than that.
Should have been dealt with.
Should have been. But, yeah, to see James Hird now back, and it's funny how things change. You know, I'm sort of helping out a little bit with the VFL now, and we had both his boys play last week in the VFL side, and both had really good games. So it was good to see Hirdy there. I was actually running off the ground in my quarter-time speech, and Hirdy came through and gave me a bit of a bump on the way through. So it was good to see him back in that role, whether he's back. I know he's back at GDO, doing some helping there. Whether he's back as a senior coach, I'm not sure. I reckon there's no doubt he could do it. But you'd have to ask him if he's prepared to.
It'd be a big comeback, wouldn't it? It'd be amazing, really, because it's sort of the journey that he's been through, and you know, all the players. I reckon all the opposition players felt for the Essendon footballers during that period, because you know it was just unfortunately poorly handled and just turned into an absolute disaster.
It did, and as basic as it sounds, you know. There was not one, I know I'm a pretty basic bloke, but there was not one positive test that was done through that whole time. There were 8 players who were never tested through 2011, halfway through 2012, and I was one of those players. So to be suspended, to cop all what we copped, and for me personally, not even to get tested during that time, I'm not sure how you go down as a drug cheat, but unfortunately, that was how it all worked out.
You were at the Bombers for 22 years and 58 days, and you could almost go 50% of it, the team was unbelievably successful, and then it was a struggle in the second half of your career. After you lost that grand final in 2001 against the Brisbane Lions, walk us through the next step for the Bombers and how it became more challenging going forward.
Yeah, you probably thought, yeah, you're right. You know, 93 we didn't expect, but we got there. 2000, the period of 99, 2000, 2001, losing 99, 2000 having a fantastic season. 2001, obviously Brisbane was starting their run of a few premierships in a row. So we probably still thought we were okay. I think when we had a few salary cap issues too that really knocked us around. You can't blame that, but we lost a few guys in, Blumfield, Carousella, Heffernan. I think Dimmer was out there too for a while, so that obviously wasn't handled as well as we could, because you'd like to keep those players in that side. So, but it was a tough period. There's no doubt about it. There was obviously a few changes in the footy club. Kevin Sheedy, there was a bit of pressure on him as well, with how he was going and what he was doing to the team. He managed to coach for a fair bit of time after that, but it was a tough period of time. That you're right. Which it's not great, but I was probably part of that team too, that 10 or 12 years that we didn't have as much success. It's a bit frustrating as well, but it was good we had the early day success, but and even where Essendon are now, it's a bit of a tough watch at the moment, but you still believe in them, but we need to get going again, because it was a bit of a tough patch that I did have during the second half of my career.
Well, it's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy to stay up there and always be highly competitive. You look at, I suppose, of recent years, the Bulldogs were able to get a flag, which was great, but they'd always been down. The Tigers had always been down. So it's so hard to contend. Yes, you might be able to push back towards the finals, but it's so hard to contend and win.
Big one, yeah.
There's a lot of players that go through their career, and unfortunately they don't ever get to play in a grand final. They don't get to experience winning a grand final, which is what I suppose all of us dream of. So really, when you look at it, although you did play, the average lifespan of an AFL football is about 3.5 nearly 4 years, right? You played for how many years?
Oh, I had 22 and a half, 23. If you count the pre-season, it's only 23.
That is, and as you said, footy trips as well on top of that, because it's all about the social.
30 years, I reckon. having footy trips.
So tell us, from a footy trip point of view, what was your very best trip? Was it down to Horsham or Echuca, or was it overseas somewhere?
It wasn't Tassie or Bali or Phuket. I think. I'm not sure if you go. We went to a footy trip to Ibiza 1 year, and I remember it was up.
Can you remember it?
We got to I remember getting to the airport. It might have been after 2000. I get them all mixed up, but I remember we had a good year. We had some footy money in the kitty that was quite high. In excess of $100,000 in our footy trip. Potty. So we knew we were going to go somewhere quite good, and I remember getting to the airport and. And I just 2000. I had my first. Mason was born in 2000, so I was a bit do I get on a footy trip? The missus she might be a bit tough on me going. But anyway, cut a long story short, I was only going to go on the footy trip for a week. I wasn't having a 2-week footy trip. I was only going to go for a week.
Essendon were doing 2-week footy trips.
Early days. It was ridiculous. 10 days, 2 weeks, it killed you. But anyway, so I got to the airport with my passport, bags packed, ready to go, not really knowing where we're going. I knew it was going to be somewhere good and somewhere hot. They said, just get to the airport. We're having a week away. It's going to be good. It's going to be tough.
So how do you explain at home, I don't know where I'm going, I've just got to get to the airport?
Yeah, well, I think I told my missus I was going to Thailand because that was it was only 9 hours away or 10 hours away, so she wouldn't have been, maybe not Thailand, it might have been a bad spot to say, but anyway, so I said we're going to Thailand. Get to the airport, a guy named Peter Berbakoff was organising the trip, and a good fella, he still works up at Sydney, wasn't sure, he was a little bit different, and he said when we got there, we're going to Ibiza. And I didn't know where it was. I said to a few of the boys, how far away, what's it like? And we flew from Melbourne to Brisbane, Brisbane to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Rome, Rome to Madrid, Madrid to Ibiza.
He got you the cheap tickets.
The cheap tickets. It took us about 50 hours to get there.
Oh.
And again, Mason had just been born. I was only on the trip for 5 days. 2 days, took 2 days to get there. But it was a beautiful spot. Was Ibiza though? It was on the islands overlooking Spain, I think it was, and that was a really, really, really good trip. But got to go to Vegas 4 or 5 times. In the end, it became just a Vegas trip because the young boys just love going to Vegas for a bit of fun and enjoying themselves. But that Ibiza one was a special one. But I was in the air for 2 days. I was there for 4 days. I was in the air for 2 more to get back. It was a tough one.
So Ibiza, are you a shirt off podium operator, or how do you go once you get on into those nightclubs?
Shirt off podium type of guy. I reckon you might have been one of those, Carl.
I was looking at Nick.
Very short. No deflecting there. Thank you, Carl.
Even though I was tall and skinny, my skin folds, believe it or not, weren't great. So the rig didn't come out too much. But I left that to Mark McVeigh.
Was he the best sort of footy trip operator?
He was a good operator, Spiky boy. And I'll leave it to Lloydie. I'm not sure Lloydie get his shirt off, but I'll throw him in there.
Lordo would be sitting in the corner just trying to take in everything. He loves that, doesn't he, Lordo? He loves
we got him going. We got him going in the end, though.
Did you?
First few footy trips he wasn't that interested in, and then he wasn't even a drinker, really. Not that it's all about drinking, but we got him in the cruises, and then we got him on the Coronas, I think. I still think he's not a CUB man or a VB man, but he was a pretty good operator. But, yeah, good times. No, I just enjoyed the environment of, 30 or 40 blokes around you, and not a big nightclub really person, but having a beer with your mate, having a laugh. I didn't speak to too many girls, I must admit. It was all about having a drink and a good time.
Yep. And even now, like the great thing with, what some of the past Essendon players have done, you have a little punters club. Yeah. And I saw them at the Magic Millions, and they go up and they hang out for a few days, and it's their catch up, and there's probably about 20 of you, and just having a great time. And it's fantastic to see, people who worked hard, trained hard, and put their heart and soul into the football club. It's great to see everyone still connecting.
And that's, again, it's simple. That's why I played footy. Like, I didn't play. I love the game. It was fun. I got paid, yes, but you'd give all that back for the mates you've got. And I've got mates that live in Perth, Darwin, wherever it might be. But when you do fly into those places and you ring them up to say hello and have a beer, they're always down there. So. Yeah, it's a good point. Local footy, same thing. Country footy. I've been away this past week through Echuca, Horsham, Mansfield, and just to drive through the town when there's local footy on. It's like a ghost town. Everyone's at the local footy watching the footy, and it's for those relationships that for me, 23 seasons, a lot of people you play with and a lot of people you meet, and that's what I look back on quite fondly.
Round 9, 2015. Your 400th and final game. What do you remember about
You went to 2015. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Really.
What I remember getting subbed out. James Hurd said, you're not getting a kick. You're coming off with me at half time. And a bit of my fault. I think I went into the game a little bit sore. But I wanted just to... I did feel a bit of pressure with the 400th game. I just wanted to get it out of the way. But, yeah, it was a Dreamtime game against Richmond. So, obviously another big game that Kevin Sheedy, really introduced. And to play that with, some of the Aboriginal boys in the side, the Indigenous boys and, Courtney Dempsey and all the boys I did play with, it was a big day. It didn't play that well in it, but, to get to 400, I didn't know it was going to be my last game. Maybe mentally, again, not a good period. We're going through that whole drug saga. I probably think it got to me in the end. I think I probably could have finished off the season with a few more games, but in the end I got to 400 and. Some just hit me and I thought, this is going to be it. You wanted to give Tate Pears a run. Cale Hooker was coming through. We had some good younger players coming through. So in the end, it was a good celebration. But probably a sad time really for me.
And that would be your last game. Now here's a bit of trivia for you both. As I said, you played for 22 years and 58 days.
How
the
many
longest
goals?
of any other player.
72.
Oh, did you? Oh, you already got that. Okay.
You've got another record. The most amount of teammates in a career. Guess how many players you played with throughout your career? I'll let Croft guess first because you might be able to do it.
Gee. Wow. 191. That's probably way over.
So games, they played AFL games with.
Yeah, so the amount of different players that ran out on a footy field with you.
Let alone to be on a list, the list guys.
Well, back in the early days,
probably not
massive.
150.
164.
164. Yeah.
I just found that quite fascinating. It just sums up your longevity and how many players come and go in a career.
Yeah, and that's not only the list. I'm showing my age a bit, but that's not only the list. We had lists of 42 players, and sometimes it would be 15 to or 12 to 15 guys that wouldn't get a game. So there's probably a few more with regards to the list, but it's a lot. And I think the other stat someone threw at me on Saturday night was playing in front of over 19 million people.
Wow.
And again, that's probably showing I'm not pumping myself. That's showing my age more than anything else. It was, and the Essendon were a successful club, in those early parts.
It's an incredible career. When I think of Dustin Fletcher, I think of the players he had to play on. Like, it's daunting, scary. You don't sleep leading up to playing on Lockett and Dunstall and Carey and Longmire, he kicked 101 year. All of them. Peter Sumich. Did you play on Alan Jakovic at all for Melbourne?
Yeah, great you mentioned that. He kicked a lazy 9-1 on me one day.
Did he?
At the MCG. He had 2 years, I think 98, 96 goals, was an absolute talent freak. Could have played a little bit more, but he was an absolute gun.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, we'll move on from that.
No, he was a very interesting player. He was a great player, but as you said back then, that's the full forward's job was to kick all the goals.
Yeah, that's right.
Like my first game, I was forward pocket next to Jason Dunstall. And I got told, do not get in his road. Go and start on the 50-metre arc on the boundary at Waverley. So you virtually need to catch a cab to get front and square when the ball comes in. And that was pretty much it. And if ever, I reckon I got a front and square round 15 against Fitzroy. My first front and square because he dropped one. Yeah. And then the coach said, that's why you're in the side. I said, I don't think I want to play forward pocket.
Put me on the ball.
Yeah, get up the field. So so you played footy for such a long time. When I think of Dustin Fletcher playing on the great players, but the long kicks, obviously the spoils, but you'd always, do the torps. But you did a lot of torps on the run as well. Is that something you practiced as a kid?
I think we practiced. And I'd probably go back to my old man. We'd always be out there kicking, torpedoes and drop punts. Dad played obviously in the 70s and early, or mainly 70s really. And you kick, if you watch footy back then, it was a drop kick early days, or you'd just be out there kicking a torpedo in a normal kick just to the next contest. So I enjoyed watching that. I probably couldn't do it. I remember one day I played, didn't have a great game. I had 7 kicks and 2 handballs, and out of the 7 kicks I had, and I got Sheeds absolutely ripped me after the game, I kicked 5 torpedoes and 2 check sides. I didn't kick 1 drop punt. And he basically said, what the hell are you doing? But yeah, with Sheeds, he was good though. If you kick 1 torpedo and it worked, he'd let you go on and kick another couple. So, but if it's funny, you feel a bit of pressure. Like I didn't kick too many goals. The only goals I kicked were from outside 50. And towards the end of my career, you actually felt the crowd, when you got the ball in your hand. So you sort of felt like you had to kick a torpedo or have it shot at goal. But the best one I kicked, no doubt, was the one against St Kilda, where was on the run, where Lloyd actually handballed me the ball. He didn't handball too much, or either did Scotty Lucas, but he handballed. I kicked one on the run, which was a good one. But enjoyed kicking a goal. Didn't kick too many, but kicking torps was always
He'd
fun.
Probably reminds you to this day, Lordo, that hey, I gave you the ball.
Yeah, well, he'd probably tell me he could have kicked it, but he wouldn't have kicked it. He was just a drop punt, left foot bang. He was a great kick for goal, mind you, but he was a good man.
And then you were celebrating poor Justin Kazitsky got in the way, and you just gave him a nice shove away too.
So I went in the game. I actually had a guard on. I actually had sore ribs going into the game, and as I just ran after I kicked, I was sort of running back to position. He'd give me a little one on my guard, and it actually got me in the right spot. So I actually came off after I kicked it. Didn't look like much, but got me right in the right spot. But it was a bit embarrassing, but that's what went down.
So being a long kick has obviously flowed through to, one of your sons who's overseas, or two of your sons who are overseas,
Both over there.
Kicking for a career. So tell us what they're up to.
Yeah, so they had a crack at footy for a while. Were reasonable players, but in the end decided to go down a bit of a different path and have, which is getting quite. There's quite a few over the boys over there now. So they're both over at college in America. Mason being over there for about 16 months now. Had a really good year as a true freshman for the University of Cincinnati. They went undefeated last year in a fantastic season, and only yesterday had 9 guys drafted. Nine guys went in the NFL draft, which was massive for the team. But had a good year as a true freshman. Again, got to put on some weight. He's put on upwards of 16, 17 kilos, believe it or not already. So he's got to put some weight on.
Every time you order something over there, it comes with fries and a big thick shake.
Mate, yeah, your Cokes, even a coffee, you get a litre of coffee when you go and ask for a coffee at down the local coffee shop. But having a really good experience over there. He's still a while away from the NFL draft and all that type of stuff. But, he will have a go at that when it comes by, but you've got to do the best you can. He's got another 2 or 3 years in the college system, and then my youngest Max has just gone over to University of Arkansas and a place called Fayetteville, big SEC school. So, and he's been getting in, having a real go. Put on 7 or 8 kilos. Only been there 3 months, so they're paying for it. So they just make sure they work them hard, and they're having a bit of good fun along the way.
And what about this? Week 1 of the season, Cincinnati versus Arkansas.
No, get out of here.
September 3, so they haven't played each other for about 20 years.
You're going to that, aren't you?
So that's the one
I think we should all go.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, we'll get over for. So that's in Arkansas. That'll be played in front of 80,000 because they've got quite a big stadium there. But that's the big one. Max has got a bit of work to do. They've got quite a good punter, though, Arkansas already, who came back for a COVID year. So he's a 5th year, or he's quite an older boy, but really good kid, good punter. So Max and him might team up a little bit, depending on what happens in the next sort of 3 or 4 months. But we'll be over for that one, big one. My wife hasn't seen Mason for about 18 months. I was lucky enough to go over there on New Year's Eve and see him in Dallas when they played against Alabama. So, September 3 is a big one. We're just planning at the moment. Airfares aren't cheap, I tell you. It's still going to hurt the old bank balance, but
especially where you fly up the pointy end.
I'm not spending 10k up the pointy end. But
how will you go watching that one? Your 2 sons potentially against each other.
But not only that, you said 80,000 people. It's just incredible to think, hey, a college game and the way that they embrace, that culture and that game.
And I always think why it's so big, and it's so big because obviously you've got the NFL and you've got college and you've got the TV rights, which are massive. But I think it's more after that. They don't have. You can't go and play local footy or country footy when you turn 24, 25. Basically, you're done. So that's what they put in at college is very big, and obviously a lot of schools. But yeah, it's going to be a big trip. A lot of people are wanting to go over, and I think you've got to get to LA to Fayetteville.
So what's it called?
Fayetteville, yeah.
Fayetteville. So
how do I explain it? Have you seen the show Ozark? It's on Netflix.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
It's sort of up that sort of area. So it's a small college town. They're quite good at basketball, very good at obviously footy too. So it's a big school, but we'll rip over there for that one.
In some of the movies where you see them in little college towns, but then they've got their virtually college number in the front lawn. Is it a town like that?
Oh, yeah, it's probably not, the Florida, you see that type of place, but, all the, what are they called? The frat houses and the...
they've got all those?
Oh, yeah, they've got all that. Yeah,
really?
That's a bigger culture than I thought.
So is your son in a frat at the moment?
Nah, I think, how do you explain it?
He's doing his initiation.
Yeah, so footballers, basically they say, frat's not for you, right. Because... As you know, footballers can get a bit excited when they get a few drinks in them, and probably not a good environment to be around. But so they're basically not in the frats, but they are a big part of college life. And yeah, I dare say there've been a few college parties that I don't sort of take
We'd
that
be
away from
disappointed
it.
if
Yeah,
you
I'd be
didn't.
disappointed if they didn't. So yeah, but no, it's a good way of life. They look after the boys pretty well. When you got 115 in the footy program, it's a big ask, but they do it pretty well. They work them hard. I think the whole idea is they get them up early. You know, they train early. They go to their classes. They go back and do some weights and do practice. And by 8, 9 o'clock, you know, they're in bed. Oh, that's what they tell me again. They're in bed. They're in bed. But it's a good program. I quite like the way they go about it because it's a lot different to football here. We do it a different way, but it's a pretty good program.
So when you're there in September, are you going to pop along to maybe a college party after the game and go along and just experience what it's all about? Just pop your head in.
What am I, 46? It's probably pushing the... Actually, I went to buy a pair of jeans the other day, and I said to my wife, I might get a pair with a rip in the jeans. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, it can't be that bad, can it? But no, I don't think so, yeah. They have that, which is quite good because they make it's a big day. It's a bit like the old days, going to play footy over at the Adelaide Oval.
So they've got the car park and their barbecues and
Tailgating.
They rack the caravan comes. They do that. They do the whole lot there. They got the meat and the spit.
Marching bands.
The
all
whole
sorts
lot.
of things.
Yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day
The
event.
cheer girls or the gymnasts. What do they call it? The cheer.
Yeah, they got the
setups?
band. Yeah, the way they do it, like they got the band going too. It's a big deal to be in the band. It's a big deal to be a cheerleader, and it's a big day of footy. It starts, if it starts at 7 o'clock, by 1 o'clock, that's when you're all there.
Yep.
Starting that day. So I don't think I'll get to a party, but I'll have a few beers beforehand.
Now, an amazing career, and the cherry on top was being inducted to the Essendon Hall of Fame and becoming a Bomber legend. What did that mean to you?
Oh, it was big. It was big again, and you play footy for. You don't play footy for awards, but premierships is the main one. And now that you're finished, Crichton medals, best and fairest, are big as well. And to be part of the AFL Legends was great. Good for my family, good for the Essendon people, not just me. I played footy for a long time, and the smiles you put on those people's faces. The night itself was a fantastic night. I must admit, it was a bit sad too. When you got guys like Neil Danaher, who I didn't have a lot to do with Neil, even though he was at Essendon early days. But to see what he's done through his footy career, post footy, and I've raised over $55 million for MND. It was great to see him, presented with his, and the other one was Dr. Bruce Reid, who was great for me, great for the Essendon family and footy club for a long time, and he obviously passed away probably about 2 years ago now. Tough to see that, and myself and Gavin were probably the current day or the guys that got legend status, and it was good for us too. But I always lean back to those two guys. It was quite an emotional night, but one that we celebrated, and now to be looked back as a legend to me doesn't mean too much. My footy days are done, but it was a good night.
And it's obviously when you say you're not too fazed by it, but I think your family and everyone connected with you, or your schoolmates, I think they'll look back on it and be extremely proud of what you've been able to do. It is incredible, 400 AFL games, and we've said it many times, playing on those players, and the journey. It wasn't all as it started out, winning premierships and winning every week. It had a disappointing end. Yeah. But you just got to reflect on all the great times, which obviously there's great friendships, there's premierships, there's great footy trips, there's all sorts of stuff, which, by the sounds of it, that's what, made you want to be involved and stay involved for such a long time.
I think so. And it was as basic as this. Someone asked me the other day about how'd you play for so long, and you need a bit of luck. You need to be able to train hard, at some stage. You got to be able to play, through a bit of pain. You don't go into too many weeks where you're not sore, you got injuries. But in the end, the way I summed it up to this person was, and it's a bad, not a disrespectful thing, but I sort of treated AFL football like it was local footy, even though I didn't play local footy. I'd turn up on Monday, Tuesday, early days, Thursday night and train. You do your weights, get it all done, you go home. You didn't get caught up with too much of the politics in between, and I didn't put pressure on myself, and I think it was just for that fact. It got a little bit harder as, post 2000 or 2005 sort of onwards, because it was becoming, it's a very professional sport, but if you didn't treat yourself too seriously, I treated it a bit like local footy, which maybe wasn't a great thing, but it kept me going for that period of time.
Yeah, I think there's something definitely in it, because sometimes when you're 100% there and you can't get away from it, mentally it brings you down, and then if your form's not there and the team's not going so well, it can push you out the door. Whereas, I think there's a lot, and I know there's a lot of footy coaches even today are trying to get that balance, trying to get them doing other things in their life. I know Chris Fagan's really big on that, and the Brisbane Lions seems to be working for the Brisbane Lions. So it's a hard one, isn't it? Especially when it's become such a professional sport.
It is, and I've just been back helping Brent Stanton just with I deal with just all VFL listed players really, but seeing that the pressures. I've been out of the game for a period of time, and it gets magnified. Obviously, Essendon are going through have been for a while, going through a bit of a tough patch, this season, and when they got young, you got a reasonable young side, and you see that the pressures that they've got to face every week when you're not winning, it just adds another layer to it. So, and hopefully we can fight our way out of it. There's a bit of work to be done, but there's no doubt it's a different game now. You're stating the obvious, but it's a different environment that the young kids come in, and sometimes you feel like just saying to them, just go and play footy. You don't have to stand there in the zone. You don't have to go and do this. Don't go and do that. Just go out and play footy. Take the game on, and enjoy it. Because when you enjoy your football, usually you're playing in a better way.
And a few more torps here and there, boys. Just launch into a few torps on the run. So, from a playing point of view, obviously played with 164 players over your journey. Who's the best? Who's the best player? I know it's hard to pick one, but we're going to make you pick one.
I said James Hird before, and he is the best. And for the reason being, he kicked goals, he put his head over the footy, and he won games off his own boot. Probably two or three, just far off. And you're probably, Michael Long. I know he didn't have a, sustained long career, but him. I learned a lot off Michael Long in his early days. And the other one, you've got a lot to choose from, but someone draws me back to Mark Mccurry, and you'd remember playing him. Mark Mccurry is that high half forward role that you see a lot of guys playing today, which is a tough role to play. He was someone that he was just a fantastic player. Again, maybe he had a great career. I enjoyed watching or playing with him, and obviously watching him play. And he was others, but fast forward, Matthew Lloyd. The big fish is in there. He had a great end there at Hawthorn, and we had some greats. There's no doubt about it.
I asked him for one, and he gave us 5 or 6.
No, very diplomatic. He did say Hird was the best. Though.
Yeah, it gets people say, but James Hird was the one. He was a captain, and he was just a great player. Had all the attributes.
Dustin Fletcher, we have loved having a chat today. We're going to wrap it up with some fun ones. True or false? You always got to train in an hour early, not to train, but to sit in the car, read the Herald Sun, have a coffee and a toast.
That's true. I know for a fact.
True, yeah. Coincided with my kids being born and get me out of the house type of feel about it.
But as you said, it just gives you some time to
a bit of
clear the head
and
relax and see.
Geez, that was tough early days though. I thought having kids was going to be easy, but it's pretty tough, isn't it? We don't sleep and anyway.
Best sledge you ever heard?
Best sledge I had? I heard a lot, and I can't repeat a lot. I remember it was against me. First time we played Collingwood, I was copping it from behind the goals. Was down the Collingwood cheer squad end, and back when you could warm up out the ground, your forwards would kick the goals. They'd throw the ball back to you, kick them back. And
was that Victoria Park? Did you play?
I didn't play there. This was the MCG, a big crowd though, and we were down the Collingwood cheer squad end, and one guy was absolutely. This was before the game started. First time I played Collingwood, and he was into me. Fletcher, you're a, whatever he was saying.
Wasn't complimentary.
Yeah, you're a lucky this, lucky that. How you get in a game? And he kept on mentioning the word lucky. Anyway, in the end, he actually threw the ball back to me. I got quite close to him on the fence, and I said to him, "What's with the abuse?" And he said, "Have a look at you. Look at your legs." And he said, "You've got lucky legs. Lucky they don't snap and go up your ass." And I thought he was saying lucky that I was getting a game because I was tall, skinny, probably not up to AFL standard. But it was lucky legs, lucky they don't. And I actually had a bit of a laugh about it. But, and this particular guy still goes to the footy, even 2015, and we have a laugh about it now. But I thought he couldn't think of another one, but he still calls me lucky as of 2015, my last game. But yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one.
But I like the fact that he's giving you such a hard time when you're first starting.
Yeah.
And then by the end of your career, it's sort of like one of those inspirational American movies where the opposition, where the New York Yankees go, yeah, okay, good on your lucky legs, you know.
Yeah, that's
and
right,
then claps you off at the very end.
Well, I did come back to
That's kind of nice.
Yeah, I did come back to him and say, I'm not even sure, 2007 we'll say, and, lucky this, lucky that. There were a few swear words still involved as it got on, but I sort of said to him, the Collingwood supporters aren't as smart, are they? You couldn't think of another nickname or something else to actually rip into me about, but no, he's a good fella in the end. He's in their cheer squad, I think still in their cheer squad. Yeah.
Never a dull moment with the Collingwood cheer squad involved in the story.
Right.
Best spray you ever heard from a coach?
Sheeds, no doubt about that. Well, we lost to Sydney. We had a bad game up in Sydney. We were a few goals up. And he never really was one to sit down every player and go through every player. This particular day, we were 3 goals up with about 8 minutes to go, lost the game. It was the SCG, came into the old change rooms, and you could hear him come in. He was punching the wall and he kicked the doors on the way through. He was fuming. When he sat us all down for the first time in some time, he sat us down. He went through every player. And, he said, Fletcher, you weren't with Lockett. Should have been right up, spoiling, chopping his arms, doing those things. You were terrible today. Joey copped it. Merckx copped it. You got to Stephen Alessio, who was sitting right next to me. Sess in the ruck. Terrible going up against whoever it was. You weren't putting your knee up. You duck your head. Absolutely terrible. Anyway, this was obviously going a bit easy on there were a few swear words and, hitting the walls still. Anyway, the spray went for about an hour, the spray. Every player copped it. So 22 players, probably about sort of 4 or 5 minutes each, we copped it. Anyway, so it finished. Sess got up and he said to me, can you believe the spray I copped? I said, mate, you hear mine? I thought that wasn't great. And I said, not really. I wasn't really listening to it too much. And he said, coming from a bloke who didn't even play. Sess was actually, the days where you might bring another player out to run out to try and fool the opposition. So he still had his tracksuit on, and actually he actually ran out and was the 23rd man at the time. So he actually didn't even play the game. But Sheed still thought he played, managed to absolutely rip into him. So that was it's quite funny now. But Sess didn't appreciate not even playing and copying the biggest spray of the lot.
Worst of both worlds.
Yeah, well, that's right.
How did you go with Kevin Sheedy? Because he was out there and even addressing you and weekly meetings and stuff. He'd talk about all different things away from footy. So how did you go getting those messages through to you, especially as a young kid going, what is this guy on about?
Yeah, I think he deflected. He obviously, he's an unbelievable. He deflected things away from pretty well, but I probably didn't like sometimes when he's done a great job for the club, and that's obviously the way he did it. But he'd build these games up sometimes that were that big. We'd be into North. We didn't have a great relationship with North Melbourne, being a neighbouring suburb. We were around them all the time, and he used to build those games up and. Building that up, and you got the Martians and you got the Marshmallow game, and you knew that I felt that he was sort of building up too much, and he'd be getting Hawthorn up, he'd be getting Collingwood, Carlton up, and was putting more pressure on us. So I felt that a little bit tough at times, but he was just all for it. He was a positive person. Again, I'd known him. I get on really well with him, so I could go and sit in his office and listen to him. I didn't understand all of it, I must admit, but I got along well with him. But he was great for the game, and Anzac Day, what a day that is. For him to go and speak to Collingwood, I know it was a sacred day. He'd never played footy, and the money that we give back to the Anzacs now, and the reputation that the respect we pay to those guys is big. So he's done a lot for footy. So my relationships was quite good. There might be a few other guys that probably didn't, but I had a great relationship with him.
Most annoying teammate?
Most annoying teammate? Over the journey. Early days, Peter Somerville was someone that, big ruckman again. He was a different one. I remember Lloydie sitting.
Even the way he moved different to everyone else.
So Summer was number 19, Matthew Lloyd was number 18, and back then when you're only a young fella, you'd sit on your area. You wouldn't sort of move over. One particular day, I was sitting in the rooms talking to Lloydie. He was there. He was actually sitting on Summer's side of his locker. Anyway, Summer came back in. He was a bit of a grouchy old sort of man, and he was chewing a bit of gum at the time, and Lloydie had his top off. And he's walked in and he said, Lloyd, get away from, where you're sitting. It's my locker, rah. And he had some chewing gum in his mouth, and he went bang with the chewing gum right in the middle of his chest where Lloydie had a bit of hair on his chest. And he's ripped the chewing gum off, and he's ripped a bit of hair off in the process. So summer was a good one, but we had a lot of...
He was probably growing that hair for about 4 or 5 years.
He was only young at the time, so that was a bit of an eye-opener for Lloydie. But yeah, we had some good ones over the years.
Who was yours, Croft? Most annoying teammate?
Oh, gee. It's... I don't know. You do have annoying teammates at times. Probably Dicko, Ben Dixon. Hurricane Dixon I used to call him, because sometimes the mood he'd get in, he'd just start going crazy, doing his thing.
Well, there's 42 blokes in it.
He was probably more annoying out on the drink.
Oh,
that's when he really turns into Hurricane Dixon, and then he turns into a pothole. You want to try and avoid him, through the rest of the night. But no, we absolutely loved him.
I've never heard that one.
To be honest, there's nothing but love for him. But he was so coachable. You could tell him anything, or even to liven up a room, do this, and he'd do it. He was the man.
Final question. We've loved having a chat. Your favourite footy moment?
Was it the podium in Ibiza?
No, it wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. What's your favourite moment? Maybe it's, that Michael Long goal in 1993 when we needed a spark, and to see, Stephen Silvani stretch out and drop down after he's thought he's touched it, and him kick that goal. Again, I was 18, grand final, nearly 100,000 there, and as just a student, a kid playing, but watching what he did, probably goes down as nearly one of my better moments. But you can't go away from premierships, there too. The game against North Melbourne, that comeback game where we're 69 points down, was special. But from a footy perspective, again, it's hard to name one, but that just rings true for some reason, Michael Long's efforts.
And what about, were you playing in the game? You probably were, because you didn't miss many games, when Hurdy embraced on the boundary line after kicking a goal?
Yeah.
That was pretty special.
That was a special one against West Coast. I think him and Sheeds had a bit of a run in that week of, I'm not sure the full story, someone will understand it, but had a bit of a run in that week, and I think Hurdy had a bit of choice words back to the box, and for him to kick that winning goal, and just a raw emotion of someone hugging a fan after he's kicked a great goal. And again, why is he the best player you ever played with? That probably sums it up. Threw himself in the centre, ran down forward. I think he got a handball off Damien Peverell, managed to scrounge it off Pev, and kick the winning goal.
And one more is the game against the Bulldogs, the mark of the century. Were you playing in that match?
Gary Moorcroft, yeah.
How good was that mark?
It was a good. Yeah,
that was unbelievable.
Yeah. And just for the type of, Gary was only a smaller guy. For him to actually get up and sort of hang up there for a while, it's no doubt the best mark I've seen. Probably still now. You know what I mean? He was a great guy, Gaz, and he was my age, Gary. We played under 12 Victorian football together as a young fella. So, and he went on to play. He might even still be playing footy. So he had a great career, but that was a tremendous mark, and again, probably could go down as one of the best moments.
Oh, the height, and the spring and the landing,
and Scotty Lucas kicking on his right foot. I think he kicked it in on his right foot. So that's probably something else to remember about that one.
We've loved having a chat. Thanks so much for clarifying some of the texts that came in. Your doubles career with Chris Anstey, ironing out that Dan Kelly.
Not only that, he was
soft.
worried about. What are we going to talk about for an hour?
Yeah.
We could go on for another 5 hours if we really wanted.
And the Bombers will be back.
The Bombers will be back.
Faithful. We've got to get a few more games into some of the younger kids. I know it's a little bit of maybe a cop-out, but I think we'll be a better team when we get 30, 40, 50 games into Harrison Jones, young Cox, Draper's showing a bit, Archie Perkins. There's still a few more to name. So we'll be back, but we've got some work to do.
We'll run that clip to lift the Bomber morale.
That's exactly it.
And punters, you've been listening to Tabs Inside 50.